Hi, welcome to ConflictStory, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
I never imagined that someone would have the audacity to try to sell my land without my consent, but that's exactly what happened when Karen, the overzealous president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association, decided my secluded 6-acre property was up for grabs. What ensued was a roller coaster of legal battles, relentless harassment, and near heartbreak as I fought to keep the haven I'd worked so hard to secure. But in the end, justice prevailed, not without leaving a trail of chaos in Karen's wake. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Alex, and I'm a 42-year-old architect. 4 years ago, I purchased a beautiful, forested 6-acre plot located just outside the small town of Cedar Creek in Montana. It was the perfect spot, a serene slice of wilderness nestled against a protected wildlife reserve, with towering pines, a crystal-clear creek, and enough seclusion to feel like I was miles away from civilization. The property was technically part of the Oak Ridge community, but it was situated far enough from the subdivision's heart that it felt like a world apart. More importantly, it was explicitly exempt from homeowner association jurisdiction, a fact I confirmed multiple times before finalizing the purchase. For years, that land was my retreat. I'd drive out on weekends, setting up a tent near the creek and sketching plans for the cabin I dreamed of building one day. The land was my sanctuary, my escape from the pressures of city life and deadlines. But my peaceful weekends were shattered one sunny Saturday morning when I heard the crunch of gravel under tires and an angry honk coming from the end of my driveway. Puzzled, I emerged from my tent to find a sleek silver BMW SUV idling at the entrance. Out stepped a woman in her mid-50s with a sharp bob and a pair of oversized sunglasses that looked more suited for a red carpet than a dirt trail. She marched up the drive with a clipboard in hand, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Excuse me," she called, her tone curt. "What do you think you're doing?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm camping on my property." Her eyes narrowed. "This land is part of the Oak Ridge community, and camping is strictly prohibited under our homeowners association regulations." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm aware of the Oak Ridge Homeowner Association, but this property is exempt from your rules. I have the deed to prove it." Her expression hardened. "I'm Karen Taylor, president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. All properties within Oak Ridge fall under our governance, including this one. If you're going to use this land, you'll need to comply with our bylaws. That includes an immediate removal of this unsightly campsite." I stood my ground. "With all due respect, Karen, this is my private land, and it's not subject to homeowner association oversight. Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave." Karen's face flushed. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed. "I'll have you know I've been running this homeowner association for over a decade. If you don't comply, I'll be forced to take action." "Take whatever action you want," I replied firmly. "But you're trespassing, and if you don't leave, I'll call the police." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but she eventually turned on her heel and stormed back to her SUV. As she drove off, her words lingered in the air. "This isn't over." I shrugged off the encounter, thinking it was the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. Over the following weeks, I began receiving certified letters from the homeowner association accusing me of various violations. They claimed I was in breach of Oak Ridge regulations for everything from unauthorized use of the property to disrupting community aesthetics. Each letter threatened fines and legal action if I didn't cease and desist. At first, I ignored them, confident in my legal rights. But Karen was relentless. I'd find notices taped to trees on my property, warning of impending penalties. Once I even caught her on my land taking photos, muttering about collecting evidence. The final straw came 3 months later when I arrived at my property to find Karen giving a tour to a couple dressed in business attire. They stood in the clearing, discussing building plans, as Karen gestured expansively. My heart pounded as I approached, disbelief quickly turning to fury. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Karen spun around, her expression quickly morphing into a strained smile. "Alex, I didn't expect to see you here today. This is Mr. and Mrs. Carter, potential buyers for this lovely parcel." "Potential buyers?" I echoed, incredulous. "Karen, this is my land. What on earth are you doing?" The Carters exchanged uneasy glances. Wait, Mr. Carter said. Are you saying this property isn't for sale? Of course it isn't, I snapped. Karen has no authority here. Karen's smile faltered. Now, Alex, let's not make a scene. This property falls under homeowner association jurisdiction, and due to unpaid fines and violations, the board has decided to reclaim it and put it on the market. I stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. That is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. You're trespassing, and you're committing fraud. Karen's facade finally cracked, revealing the cold determination beneath. Call it what you want, but I'm within my rights as homeowner association president. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have business to conduct. I took a step forward, glaring at her. No, you're done here. Leave now, or I'll involve the police. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, I pulled out my phone. This is your last warning, I said, dialing. Leave my property immediately. Her expression turned stormy, but she reluctantly motioned for the Carters to follow her back to the SUV. As they drove off, Karen rolled down the window and shouted, "You'll regret this, Alex. This isn't over." I'd had enough. It was time to fight back. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of Karen's vendetta. After Karen's brazen attempt to sell my land, I knew I needed to take more drastic measures to protect my property and put an end to her antics. That night, I called my lawyer, Mark, who had experience with property disputes. I recounted every detail, from her confrontational visits to her outrageous claim of seizing my land due to unpaid homeowner association fines. Mark was appalled but not surprised. This isn't the first time I've dealt with a power-hungry homeowner association president, he said, but Karen's actions are way out of line. We'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately and escalate if necessary. Have you documented everything? Every letter, every notice, even photos of her trespassing, I replied. Good, Mark said. That'll strengthen our case. Let's hit her where it hurts, legally. The following week, Mark sent a formal cease and desist letter to Karen and the Homeowner Association Board, outlining her violations and warning of severe legal consequences if she continued her harassment. The letter was clear, professional, and uncompromising. It demanded that she immediately stop entering my property, remove any false fines or claims, and cease all communications unless through legal channels. Any further trespassing, the letter warned, would result in a lawsuit. For a few weeks, it seemed like the message had finally sunk in. Karen's letter stopped, and my property remained undisturbed. I even began to relax, thinking the ordeal might be over. But then came the incident that proved Karen wasn't backing down. She was just regrouping. It was a chilly Thursday morning when I received a frantic call from my neighbor, Sarah. She lived on a small farm down the road and had always been kind and supportive. Alex, you need to get out to your property right now, she said, her voice shaking. There's a construction crew out there tearing up your clearing. Karen's with them. She's claiming it's homeowner association approved development. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. Grabbing my truck keys, I sped to the property, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the sight before me was worse than I'd imagined. A bulldozer was parked in the clearing, the ground churned up and muddy. A group of workers stood around, looking confused as Karen barked orders. Bright orange stakes marked what appeared to be the boundaries of a building site. My heart sank as I realized just how far she was willing to go. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted as I jumped out of my truck. Karen turned, her face lighting up with an infuriatingly smug smile. "Ah, Alex. Perfect timing. We're breaking ground for the new Oak Ridge Community Clubhouse. Isn't it exciting?" "Community Clubhouse," I repeated, my voice trembling with fury. "On my land. Have you completely lost your mind?" Karen's smile didn't falter. "This property belongs to the Homeowner Association now. The board approved the development, and the contractors have all the necessary permits." "That's a blatant lie," I said, pulling out my phone to record the scene. "I own this land. You have no authority here. Get off my property now, or I'll have the police remove you." Karen's expression darkened. "You're welcome to call them," she said, crossing her arms. "But they'll find everything in order. We're fully within our rights." Ignoring her, I dialed the police. As I waited for them to arrive, I spoke to the construction crew, explaining the situation and showing them my deed. The foreman looked uneasy. "We were hired by the Homeowner Association," he said. "If this isn't legit, we're out of here. But we'll wait for the cops to sort it out." When the officers arrived, Karen immediately launched into her well-rehearsed speech about homeowner association authority and unpaid fines. But this time, I was ready. I handed the officers my deed, the cease and desist letter, and video evidence of her trespassing. "Ma'am," one officer said after reviewing the documents, "this property does not belong to the homeowner association. You're trespassing and attempting unauthorized construction. You need to leave immediately." Karen's face turned bright red. "This is a mistake," she shrieked. "The homeowner association has jurisdiction here. I have the board's approval." "Unless you can provide legal documentation proving ownership," the officer said firmly, "you're in violation of the law. Pack up and go." Karen sputtered incoherently, but ultimately had no choice. The construction crew began dismantling their equipment, shooting me sympathetic looks as they packed up. Karen stormed off, her threats of seeing me in court echoing through the trees. After the dust settled, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. It was clear that Karen's vendetta wasn't over, but this time I had the upper hand. As I surveyed the damage to my clearing, I vowed to take every possible step to protect my land from further attacks. That evening, I spoke to Mark again. "We're filing a lawsuit," I said, my voice resolute. "It's time to put an end to this for good." Mark agreed, and we began building a case against Karen and the homeowner association. Little did I know, the fight was about to get even more intense. As the legal wheels began to turn, Karen's behavior grew increasingly erratic, escalating her feud with me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Filing the lawsuit against her and the homeowner association had been a necessary step, but it also unleashed a new level of hostility that permeated every interaction. I quickly realized this wasn't just about my land anymore. Karen had made it personal. The first sign came a few days after the construction crew had been forced off my property. I received a registered letter from the homeowner association claiming that my property had been reclassified as part of a special conservation initiative, which they argued nullified my exemption from homeowner association rules. It was absurd, a desperate attempt to impose their authority where they had none. My lawyer, Mark, laughed when I showed him the letter. "This isn't just baseless, it's reckless," he said. "We'll include it in our case as further evidence of their overreach. But Alex, you need to prepare yourself. People like Karen don't back down easily." He was right. That weekend, I returned to my property to find that Karen had orchestrated yet another stunt. Signs had been placed at the entrance to my driveway reading, "Future site of Oak Ridge Community Clubhouse." They were professional looking, complete with the homeowner association's logo and contact information. It was infuriating. I ripped them down immediately, documenting the entire scene with photos and videos. Once again, I forwarded everything to Mark. "This is borderline harassment," he said. "We'll ensure it's addressed in court." Meanwhile, Karen continued to spin her web of lies among the Oak Ridge residents. She hosted an emergency homeowner association meeting where she painted me as an uncooperative outsider, refusing to respect community standards. She claimed my property's undeveloped state posed an eyesore and a safety risk to the neighborhood. Though a few residents supported her, others began to question her motives. I heard from Sarah, my supportive neighbor, that several people had started whispering about Karen's history of overreach and misuse of homeowner association funds. "People are finally catching on," Sarah said during one of our phone calls. "She's overstepped before, but this is the first time someone's fought back hard enough to make a real dent." Despite the growing cracks in Karen's facade, she doubled down. One night, I was woken by a notification from one of the motion-activated trail cameras I'd installed around my property. Bleary-eyed, I checked the live feed on my phone. What I saw made my blood run cold. A group of men in dark clothing trespassing, armed with spray paint and tools. They were defacing the clearing, painting homeowner association property on trees, and hammering metal stakes into the ground. I immediately called the police. By the time they arrived, the trespassers were gone, but the damage was done. The officers took my statement and collected evidence, promising to investigate. Mark advised me to file a formal report with the county sheriff as well, which I did the next day. The incident left me shaken but more determined than ever to see this battle through. A few days later, I had a breakthrough. One of my trail cameras captured clear footage of one of the trespassers, who was later identified as a local contractor frequently hired by the homeowner association. This revelation was a game changer. Mark filed an additional motion against the homeowner association, accusing them of orchestrating the vandalism. Karen, of course, denied everything, but her denials were starting to ring hollow, even to her supporters. The tide began to turn further when I decided to rally the community. With Sarah's help, I organized a neighborhood meeting at a local community center, a neutral ground where residents could air grievances and share their experiences. To my surprise, the turnout was larger than expected. Dozens of neighbors showed up, many of them eager to vent about their own negative experiences with Karen and the homeowner association. Some shared stories of arbitrary fines, ignored maintenance requests, and other abuses of power. "I've lived here for 15 years, one elderly man said, and it's only gotten worse since Karen took over. She's turned this place into her personal fiefdom. She tried to fine me for having a vegetable garden in my backyard," another resident added. "Said it wasn't aesthetically pleasing." The meeting became a turning point. By the end of the night, several residents had volunteered to testify on my behalf, and some even began petitioning to remove Karen from her position. It was clear that her grip on the community was weakening. As the court date approached, the atmosphere in Oak Ridge grew tense. Karen's supporters grew quieter, while her detractors became more vocal. Rumors swirled about her mismanagement of homeowner association funds, and some residents demanded an independent audit. Meanwhile, Mark and I finalized our case, armed with a mountain of evidence that painted a damning picture of Karen's overreach and misconduct. When the day of the hearing arrived, I walked into the courtroom with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Karen sat at the defendant's table, flanked by her lawyer and a few loyal supporters. She shot me a venomous glare as I took my seat. This was it, the moment of truth. Little did Karen know the tide had already turned against her, and the reckoning she had tried so hard to avoid was about to begin. The courtroom was buzzing with quiet murmurs as the judge took her seat, calling the proceedings to order. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the chance to finally expose Karen's lies and put an end to her campaign of harassment. As I glanced across the room, I saw Karen sitting stiffly at the defendant's table, her expression a mixture of defiance and unease. She had always been confident in her power as the homeowner association president, but today she looked out of her depth. Mark, my lawyer, opened our case with precision. He laid out the timeline of events, presenting clear evidence that Karen had repeatedly trespassed on my property, attempted to defraud potential buyers, and orchestrated acts of vandalism. The highlight was the video footage from my trail cameras, which not only captured the trespassers, but also linked one of them directly to the homeowner association's frequent contractor. The courtroom grew tense as Mark revealed each piece of evidence, building an unassailable case against Karen and the homeowner association. Karen's lawyer attempted to counter by arguing that the homeowner association's actions were justified under their governing bylaws, claiming my property fell within their jurisdiction. However, Mark was quick to dismantle this claim. He presented my property deed, which explicitly stated its exemption from homeowner association rules due to its location and undeveloped status. The judge's frown deepened as she reviewed the documents. When it was Karen's turn to testify, she doubled down on her narrative. "The homeowner association's actions were always in the best interest of the community," she declared, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Carter's refusal to comply with our standards posed a threat to property values and community harmony." "A threat to property values?" Mark echoed incredulously during cross-examination. "Is that why you attempted to sell Mr. Carter's land without his consent? Or why you approved construction projects on land you didn't own?" Karen's composure cracked as she stammered through her responses. The final blow came when Mark presented financial records obtained during discovery, showing questionable transactions involving homeowner association funds. The documents painted a damning picture of mismanagement and potential embezzlement. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as residents seated in the gallery exchanged stunned whispers. By the end of the hearing, Karen's defense had crumbled. The judge delivered her ruling with firm authority, declaring that the homeowner association had no legal claim to my property and that Karen's actions constituted harassment, trespassing, and attempted fraud. She ordered Karen to pay significant damages and ruled that an independent audit of the homeowner association's finances be conducted immediately. The fallout was swift. Karen was removed from her position as homeowner association president, and the audit revealed years of financial mismanagement. Residents who had once supported her now demanded reforms, leading to a complete overhaul of the homeowner association board. The new leadership promised transparency and fairness, vowing to restore trust within the community. As for me, I finally felt a sense of peace. With Karen out of the picture and the legal battle behind me, I could focus on what truly mattered, enjoying my land. I began making plans to build my dream cabin, a cozy retreat nestled among the towering pines. On weekends, I continued to camp by the creek, savoring the tranquility that had once been threatened. The experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for my rights and the power of resilience. It also brought the community closer together, as residents banded against Karen's tyranny and worked to rebuild a sense of camaraderie. Neighbors who had once been strangers became allies, united by a shared goal of creating a better future for Oak Ridge. One sunny afternoon, as I walked through my clearing, I spotted Sarah and a few other neighbors approaching with picnic baskets in hand. They'd organized an impromptu gathering to celebrate the end of Karen's reign and the start of a new chapter for the community. We laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed the beauty of the land that had brought us together. Looking back, I realized that Karen's relentless pursuit of control had inadvertently strengthened the bonds between us. Her downfall was a reminder that no one person should wield unchecked power and that justice, though sometimes slow, would ultimately prevail. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My little slice of paradise was safe, my neighbors had become friends, and the nightmare of Karen's tyranny was finally over. It was a victory hard won but worth every moment of struggle. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow.